All right, welcome back to the Crave Show with Chris, JRuss, and we've got our friend Matt Virnau with us this week. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Good. Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's nice to see you guys. JRuss, Matt here. I really thought that you guys would kind of hit it off. You got some some things in common background, but also just kind of outlook on life and kind of the way that you guys talk and the way that you care about other people, but also care about doing things the right way. Like I don't know. I was talking with Matt the other day. We ran into each other at a restaurant, and the more we talk, I was like, man, I gotta have him come on the show and connect him with JRuss. Like I think it'd be so fun to just chat and talk and um, everything. But before we get into that, what's been going on with you, JRuss? How's everything going?
Uh, uh, yeah, pretty much the same. We're in the weekend of a 3 week contract going into the third week, and it's been real good. Bunch of good dudes and a lot of fun jumps, and um, I landed off on my night jump. That was pretty exciting. Uh,
What?
um,
Give us some details. How did that happen?
well, as always, the details are a little nebulous about what I can actually share. But suffice to say that the separation was more than I expected, and the airplane was moving pretty fast, and I had decided not to use my 75, but to use I borrowed a 150 from one of the mill guys, and I don't think I've ever been so happy to be on a 150. It was it was nice. Landing off at night with not much around is interesting. So that was exciting.
What was the
Otherwise,
visibility like? Like was it like dark? Could you
yeah,
see
it's
anything?
no.
Really?
I mean, I've got equipment that allows me to see at night. I think I've been cautioned about talking about what that piece of equipment actually is, but I did have some limited amount of vision, and there's a couple things you can do there's a when you miss the drop zone to sort of light up the area you're going to be, but still not a lot of light to work with, and the moon was gone, so it was real dark.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it turned out okay, and just had a really nice weekend, relaxing a little bit. Went out with some teammates and some friends to a I don't remember what it's called. It's one of those Brazilian places where you turn the card over and they bring you the
Oh, the
meat and you turn the card back.
steakhouses.
Yeah,
The
it's
churrasco. Yeah.
churrasco or something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, I ate way too much. And just generally things are good. Just looking forward to Maury Kirk. I got the follow up for stem cells is coming up after the contract finishes. I got a couple days, and then I go down to Tijuana for that. And right after that, I got some hip surgery, and then I'm going to be down for a few weeks, just sitting here with chicken hawk while Steph goes out and makes the money.
Yeah, so Matt JRuss a couple months ago went and got a couple of cell injections in his shoulder. Um, I mean, cause I think people would be interested to hear. Like we talked about it the other day off air, but
Yeah.
how is it feeling? What results have you experienced?
It's really good. I mean, I'm looking forward to getting the actual follow up. There's an MRI, and then I'll go back for a third time. They'll do another MRI and just kind of compare how the progress has been. I would say it's about 6 months when I go back in a few days. I would say that at about 4.5 months, I felt like the progress really slowed down. So I'm looking forward to having that sort of re-upped. But still, it doesn't hurt, which is great. My mobility is good. It feels like I'm working out as much as I would have otherwise, and so overall, good.
Nice.
The MRI will be sort of the first bit of scientific evidence that I get. Everything else is just sort of anecdotal, kind of how I feel, and
Yeah,
but yeah, it's been good.
that's
It'll be
cool.
an interesting contrast with the actual surgery on my hip, where they're gonna cut through my butt and put in some metal parts, um, and the slightly more tangible as far as a procedure, but hopefully they both work the way they're supposed to. Um,
Yeah, nice. All right, well, cool. Well, I'll be interested to hear how
yeah,
that goes. The shoulder stuff. I mean, the hip stuff too. But I'm really interested in the stem cell. Like that's very interesting to me. Well,
Yeah,
Matt,
it
honest,
is.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah. No, no,
I
go,
was just gonna
Jairus.
say, yeah, the stem cells was super interesting. I've got a couple clients and friends of mine that are really deep into that, and they swear by it. Like, and they actually go down to Tijuana as well to get that done, and they've had some really good success. And some of them are even actually a bit older too, and it's kind of just helped with the longevity process. So
Yeah. I'm hoping
Well,
for that as
Matt,
well because I'm not young.
yeah.
Matt, why don't you give us just some background about you, your life, who you are, what it's like to be Matt Virnau, and w- yeah, I don't know, share whatever you
Yeah.
want to share, man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so name's Matt Virnau. That's I guess where it starts. But yeah, no, I grew up here in Texas, in LaGrange. So just kind of the typical small town, upbringing. Football was kind of my life. Went to A&M and got a degree in ag business. From there, I graduated, went to work for Cargill. I was a ranch consultant, kind of feed rep. Worked down in South Texas on some of the bigger ranches, just kind of helping them develop nutrition programs. Did a lot with deer, cattle, and horses, and did a little bit of rodeoing back in those days. And uh, ended up marrying my high school sweetheart, and we moved back to our hometown. And really quickly, it started to become one of those like sappy Hallmark stories where like the the two high school sweethearts, I was captain of the football team, she was head cheerleader, got married, and we're living in a single wide back in their hometown. And we did that for about 2 years, and just was not liking where life was going. And so one night, she was out of town doing something with work, and I called her. I was like, "Hey, I'm joining the military," and she's like, "Okay,"
Jairus's
but
face, that was awesome. Jairus went, huh?
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was one of those things where like I had always wanted to do it, and she had known me since we were kids, so she knew I always talked about it. And just kind of as life progressed, I took other opportunities, and it was kind of one of those things. I was at that time I was probably 25, 26, and I knew if I didn't move forward with it, you know, it wasn't going to happen. And just in full disclosure, we grew up together. We were living in a single wide trailer on her parents' property, and I was working for my parents. And so I think it was one of those things where we were both like, yeah, it's time to get out of town and just kind of develop ourselves. So
Were
um,
you in the Corps at A&M?
I was not. No,
Okay.
I didn't do the core. Didn't do any of that. And so I started talking to a couple of different branches. I knew I wanted to do something in special operations, and originally started with the Marines and tried to go the whole officer route because I had a degree. But because I didn't do the core, I didn't do any ROTC. Nobody would really. They weren't interested in me as an officer unless I went in and just did like infantry or something like that. And so started talking around different branches. Went pretty far into the Marine process, and but the Air Force basically said, "Yeah, we'll give you a guaranteed contract to go to INDOC uh, if you enlist." And I had been kind of chasing this thing for a few months. And I was like, "Yep, screw it, I'll just enlist. We'll go that route." So I enlisted and went into what's called the delayed entry program. And at that time, there was a lot of people that wanted to join. So there was a pretty big pool of guys that were in this delayed entry program. You did what's called the PASS test. It's the physical agility and stamina test, and it's basically push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, mile and a half run, a couple underwater swims, and then a 500-meter freestyle swim. And depending on how you did on that, kind of racked and stacked you across the country. And at that time, there was like 1,500 people inside the pool, and they would usually drop about 150 contracts every other month. And so it took me a few months to get to the point where where I had a high enough score to where I could get a contract and go. Um, you want the short version or the long version of this whole thing?
It's up
We
to
got
you,
time.
man.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool, man. Well, I'll give you the testimony then. So I went in with a pararescue contract and went through basic. And so when I was going through this pass test, I was really good on the calisthenics, and I was decent enough. Like I had enough fortitude to where I could suffer through the subsurface, the underwater stuff. But the freestyle swim, like if you're not a swimmer, like I grew up in the water, but if you're not a swimmer, that's a really hard thing to do. Like I thought I was pretty fit until they told me to swim 500 meters, and I was dying by 50 meters. And so I was, in that process when I was trying to get through this, pass this test through the contract, I was driving back and forth to Austin, going to swim coaches and trying to learn this thing. And I eventually got to where I was able to pass the swim, but it was just barely. And my other scores were good enough that it got me in that tier that actually got me a contract. Well, then you go to basic training and you spend 8 weeks in basic training and you barely touch a pool while you're there. So then I started INDOC, and day one of INDOC, you take that test again. And if you fail it, no harm, no foul. you basically get your butt kicked for 2 weeks and then you take it again. And if you fail it, big harm, big foul, you're washed out. And so day one, failed it. I passed everything, but I failed to swim. Went through 2 weeks. At that, we started with like 140 people. After about the end of 2 weeks, we were down to like, I don't know, somewhere between 80 and 100 people. And went through the test, passed everything, failed to swim. So it was like, well, that was short lived. That was a dream that got canceled real quick. And
Wait, that was the second one where if you
correct,
fail,
yeah,
you're out.
You're done, yeah. And so I failed it. And so they make you put your dress blues on. You got to go get in a line and wait to talk to the commandant. And so I was just a nobody. I was a number at that point. But what they ended up doing is they took all the guys who just failed one event and they washed them back, and they were going to give us a second chance. And so basically, NDOC at that time was like 9 weeks. And so I went into what was called the battle program, which is basically where they send the angry cadre and they just torture you for 9 weeks. And you're supposed to get stronger and better, right? And then you go back and you try it again. So 9 weeks later, we go back, we try it again. And at this point in time, like in the military, you have the way rank is done, like you have your actual rank, and then you have time in, I guess it would be time in grade, time in service, and then age. I think I got that in the right order. But at that point, we're all fairly new to the military. But I had already been there 9 weeks longer than everybody else, and I was 27 at the time. So I ended up being the ranking guy because we didn't have any officers in the next class. So I got made the team sergeant, and it went well. Actually, I was apparently did a good job as a leader, even though I kind of knew what was coming because I had done it once before. Well, we go through the 2 weeks again. Everything's going good, doing well as the leader. I fail to swim again, and which is like, you don't like that. That's kind of it, right? Like, so I'm already kind of thinking through this whole process of like, what am I going to do now? And at this point, like this is a short story, or this is so far short, but I had been there for, man, 6 months already. So if you can imagine, I've been kind of getting my butt kicked for 6 months, and I'm pretty burnt out. And so get in my dress blues, get in line again. Well, they bring me in, and I'm the very last person. It's like 7:00 at night, and I'm the last person they bring into the office. And they basically, the short version is they kind of yell at me a little bit, and they say, we're going to give you a third chance, which is like unheard of. And I'm kind of like, I don't really know that I want a third chance at this point. Like, I'm kind of over this. And,
hold on real quick. When you fail the swim test, what do you mean? Is it timed, or what do you mean you fail?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So to kind of give you a breakdown what this is like is, so every day is Groundhog's Day, right? If you do the exact same thing every single day. And so what the test is I'm really reaching back several years, but so what the test is you come in there and you do underwaters. So at that point it's 5 underwaters, so 25-meter underwater swim. So you take a breath, you go underwater and you swim 25 meters, the length of the pool in one breath, touch the wall, come back, and you're on a clock. Like, so every so many minutes, I think for like the initial phase, it's like every 3 minutes you go again, and you do that 5 times. And if you come up to take a breath before you touch the wall, any of those, you failed. And then we did that. We did mask and snorkel, which is kind of very similar. You have a mask and snorkel and you throw it out into the deep end. I think for that initial test, it was 15 meters. So same thing, they say, you go underwater, you swim underwater, you find your mask and snorkel, you put your mask on, you clear the mask, snorkel and mouth come up, and then you clear the snorkel and like, yeah, Sergeant, I feel fine. They tell you to spin. And there's a whole process of like checking, make sure your mask straps aren't twisted. If you come up and you have too much water or any water in your mask, you fail. Then you have buddy breathing, which is the one where it's you and another guy and you share a snorkel and you basically pass it back and forth while the cadre kind of harass you a little bit. And it's all very mild at this point. Like, it's not the heavy stuff yet. This is still pretty early in the process. And if you take a breath, if you take 2 breaths, you're only allowed 1 breath off a snorkel and then you have to pass it. And if I take 2 breaths off a snorkel, or if I pop and take a breath off the snorkel, it's a fail. And then there was treading. You had to tread for so many minutes or whatever with your hands, with your wrists and your ears dry. And if your wrists or your ears went under, you failed. And then you also had to swim 500 meters freestyle. That's what I was failing. I was passing all the water confidence stuff, but I was failing just the straight freestyle swim. And it was I think the time was like 9:08 or something. You had 9 minutes and 8 seconds to swim 500 meters, which is really embarrassing because there's like 6-year-old little girls that can do that. but for like a dude that's not a swimmer, that's fast. But
that's some honesty.
I don't know if a 6-year-old little girl can do it.
I don't know that, but
that might be a little much.
But
Anyway,
yeah, so that's when I say I was feeling the swim. It was the freestyle, like the distance swim. And
okay.
what sucks is once you get through that 2 weeks, you never freestyle. Well, you never get tested on the freestyle swim again. Like you pass that freestyle swim, and they give you fins, and you start finning. And I was great at finning. Like I was probably slightly above average at finning. Like I wasn't going to fail any fins, but it was the initial freestyle test because they didn't have enough fins to give to 150 dudes, right? So you kind of
Mm-hmm.
had to like narrow it down so you got your fins, and all the testing was done with the freestyle swim. So anyway, so I failed that my second time through, and they're like, "Well, we're going to give you a third chance. Like we think you're doing good on everything else. They liked who I was, but I wasn't a great swimmer, right?" And so I told him, I was like, I don't know that I want to do this, to be honest with you. And they're like, well, you got tonight to think about it. Come back tomorrow morning. And if you're going to do it, you're doing it. If not, then you leave. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I went back to my dorm, and one thing I left out is like, I'm married at this time, right? Like I literally gave my wife a kiss goodbye when they put me on the bus to go to basic. I didn't live with her for over 2 years. We didn't sleep in the same bed for almost 2 years. And like, granted I'm in the first like 9 months of this, but like, there's things, you're missing things, right? Like you're kind of like, I'm kind of over this. And so
I don't want to swim. I want to sleep with my wife.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like I feel like that's a fair thing.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah. And so anyways, so I go back and I call my brother and my older brother, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I didn't pass again. And I told him like, they offered me another slot, but I don't think I want to do this anymore. And he kind of talked me off the ledge in the way that a big brother would, right? Like, called me a few names, told me like, oh, I thought you would never quit, you big weenie, but he used other words. And,
Sissy.
and that's what he said. Yeah. And so I basically said, all right, cool. I'm gonna stick with this. So I go back the next day. I say I'll stick with it. So then they throw me back in battle. So I spend another 9 weeks with the angry cadre, getting my butt kicked. And there was I gotta be careful because like a lot of my people that I know, like they're skydivers, so they may listen to this. So I gotta be careful what I say. But there was this one really old grumpy guy. Well, we'll leave names out, but he felt like he could fix my swim, and the answer was just to have me swim more. And so we would usually do like a 2-hour pool session in the morning, and then we would have like a little bit of time off for lunch. Well, I'd have to do a quick lunch and then go meet him back at the pool, and he'd make me just swim more laps. And I was destroyed. Like I'd been doing this for almost 11 months, and I was destroyed. And so long story, we get back third time through, right? Third time's a charm. Go back, get through the 2 weeks again, everything, all that's fine. I fail to swim again. Yeah, for the third time. And I'll never forget the commandant, the guy who gave me this last chance. Like he's on the pool deck just screaming at me, right? Just like swim faster. And if you know anything about swimming, like the harder you try to swim, the slower you go. Like,
yeah, it does not work.
Yeah, it's a complete efficiency thing, right? And yeah, so I didn't just fail it. Like it was my worst time I had ever thrown up and thrown out there, and he's really pissed at me. And so they bring me back in. I'm my dress blues again. Once again, I'm the last guy coming in there, and I walk in his office. He just immediately just starts tearing into me, like, what are you doing? I gave you all these shots and blah blah blah. Like, what do you want? I think I gave the stupidest answer ever. I was like, I just want to be an operator. And he's kind of looking at me and shaking his head, and he's like, would you consider being a combat controller instead of pararescue? I'm like, absolutely. I could care less. Like, I just want to be in this community. He's like, because at that time you got like an extra 30 seconds on the swim for combat control, because like the whole idea is like PJs are, they're supposed to be like rescue swimmers too. And so combat controllers, you just need the dive qualification, but the actual swim time's not as big of a deal. So you got 30 extra seconds. And I'm like, absolutely, I'll do that. So he calls the controller commandant and it's like, hey, I got this dude, decent candidate, just is struggling with the swim. I think you should take him. And the guy's like, well, that's not really, they don't really do it that way. There's kind of a competition between the two, right? And like, they don't want each other's failures. And so, but for whatever reason, this guy decided he was going to take me. And so they switched me to combat control. But in that process of having to get my paperwork switched over, I got we call them the SOTs. So the students out of training, which is, it's all the quitters, basically, the guys that quit. And they basically just they mop and sweep for a month until they get reclassed into a new job. Well, I was technically getting reclassed into a new job. So I got thrown in with all the quitters. So instead of going back to battle, I was a combat cleaning crew, right? Like I just sat there and cleaned the dorms all day. But what it did was it let me kind of recover, let my body heal up a little bit. And so then I went back and I started selection again under the combat control title though. And when I went in and we did the same swim test, I actually swam fast enough that I would have qualified as a PJ. I was just so broken. My body was just wrecked.
You were just so
And
worn out.
I was just so worn out. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing that for 11 months, and like I really skipped over what we did in battle. But every day, or like we did these things called red line drills, where the whole goal was you just go until you puke. And like these, like I'm telling you, like the angriest people you've ever met, that's who they put in charge of us. And it was just, But anyways, funny story here. Like I don't always share this part, but it just kind of builds into the misery, right? So I'm about halfway through selection, and we're doing these jerry can runs where you carry the jerry cans, you run around the track and these intervals, and this truck pulls up, and it's these two guys, and they get out and they come talk to the cadre, and then they're looking at me, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, something's up, and they call me over, and they're like, hey man, your paperwork isn't right, you can't be here. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like we're halfway through this, and they're like, yeah, sorry man, something's not right, and you gotta go with these guys. I'm like, so I hop in the truck with these dudes, and they take me back to the dorms, and I'm walking in, and one of my buddies, like one of my best friends, like to this day, still one of my best friends, he's there, and he looks at me, he's just got this look of disgust because he thinks I'm a quitter coming back in the quitter's truck, right? And he's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, dude, I did not quit. They said my paperwork's wrong and I can't be out there. He's like, that's crap. And he was prior service, so he was a staff sergeant, so he had, he kind of knew the system a little better. He's like, you need to go to main side base, talk to this guy. And so I go, get on my clothes, go run over there, talk to this guy. The guy's like, those people are idiots. Your paperwork's fine. You can be in that course. And I'm like, sweet. So I hop on a bus, run back to our side of the base, and I go find the guys. And I'm like, hey, he's wrong. I can be here. Here's the paperwork, says I'm good to go. They're like, sorry, man, you missed 2 iterations. Like you missed 2 events. Like you can't be here anymore. Like that's the rule. Like if you ever go to sick call and you miss more than 2 events, you're done. And you have to start over. And so then I got washed back again, dude, and had to start.
What?
I did it 5 times.
That is messed up.
Yeah, I was pissed, to say the least, right? But I mean, and so long story short, like there is a silver lining at this, right? And I'm like,
oh man, this is a great story.
Yeah.
No, this is really good. Like I need to hear this story right now.
Okay, well I'm glad.
Perseverance.
So, yeah, exactly.
Well, dude, I'm telling you, man, like this was the lowest time of my life, right? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was not like some stud athlete. I thought I was, like in high school, I thought I was a stud athlete, but I wasn't, dude. I'm like, you've seen me, I'm 5'8", dude. I'm not a big dude. Like and football was I wasn't going to play. Like I knew some D1 college was gonna ask me to come play football for me. I didn't get a single letter, dude. I was brokenhearted. Like, but in my mind, it's so funny. My nickname, once I finally got to team, was Liam, and it stood for legend in his own mind. Because everyone made fun of me because I always thought I was bigger. I'd be like, I'm the same size as that guy. I'm like, dude, you're not the same size as that guy.
Liam, that's good.
Yeah. So anyway, so I was at my lowest point, man, because things had generally.
So because these guys messed up and said that your paperwork was wrong,
yeah.
They took you away for long enough that you missed 2, and then you had to start all over. But it's their fault, not yours.
Correct. Yep. So the whole thing,
and
because it's not fair. It's not fair to the other candidates, right? Because I technically had 2 hours of rest, and the whole thing about selection is it's the buildup of cumulative fatigue. Right?
Okay.
And it's not fair that I got to recover and they didn't.
I see.
Right. So it's not the same, like the mental fatigue, the mental side and of all that, right? Like it's not. I mean,
so really, at that point, it really is not fair for them, and it's not fair for you. It really, it's just messed up.
It is. Yeah. It just sucks. It just sucks to suck, right?
Man.
And so anyways, but then finally the 5th time comes through, all goes well. I make it through selection. But I've been there for like a year at this point.
Okay.
And so it's funny. So I made a promise to myself. This is a silver lining part, right? Like I made a promise to myself that I would never fail another thing again. And throughout the rest, so from selection, you go to, as a controller, so you kind of split ways with the PJs a little bit. You go to ATC, which is Air Traffic Control School, because our legacy mission was essentially that we would jump in on airfield seizures and basically take the airfield and then land the aircraft with the infantry. Like we jump with the Rangers and then land the aircraft with the infantry to do airfield seizures. That's kind of the legacy mission. With the war on terrorism, the JTAC mission has kind of been the mission that we're known for now. But anyway, so you go to air traffic control. So because a big part of what we do is talk to aircraft and call in airstrikes. So you have to know how to do all that. So you go there, which is that's a big, like it's a hard physical school, but it's really a hard academic school. Like we have a lot of academic failures there. So you're kind of, a lot big, heavy workout in the morning and then just a ton of academics all day long. And so so after ATC, then typically you go to just regular like static line airborne and then to SEER school, like survival school. Have you heard of SEER? You know what I'm talking about? It's like
Yeah,
SEER. Okay.
I've heard guys talk about. They said it's
Yes,
pretty crazy.
it is. Yeah, it is. It's crazy and it's crazy and fun all at the same time too. Right? Like if you go in with the right perspective, it's fun. Like you can't, kind of like what you're saying. There's not a lot you can say about it. You're kind of sworn to secrecy on some of the things that go on there. But there's definitely the resistance or the escape and evade side, like where you're actually out in the woods, like kind of doing the survival stuff. It's pretty fun. But the other parts aren't that fun. But so then from there you go to combat control. You go to combat control school. And then that's kind of like when you don you get your beret and you don your jump boots and all that kind of stuff. And you're what's called a 3-level controller. Well, so that is the initial pipeline. And so when I finally finished selection, I told myself I'd never fail another school again. And it was almost like I was at a really low point, and I just kind of my confidence was rebuilding throughout the process. Well, then when you go into that final phase of CCS, combat control school, you're kind of out in the field for like a week or so doing all your final missions and all that kind of stuff. And then the very last thing you do, like a day or two before graduation, it's like your family's like, it's a big deal. Like your families have flown in, like my wife flew in, her parents flew in, my whole family, sister-in-laws, like everyone is there for graduation. Well, the last thing you do is you have an unknown distance, unknown time ruck from field back to base. And it's a long ruck, just we'll say that. And you have about 100 pounds on your back. And if you don't make time, you don't pass. And it happens. Like there's dudes like they'll get there, they'll finish the ruck and like, sorry, dude, like your parents just flew here, but you ain't graduating. And so it's like you go. It's like it's a giddy up and go time. And so we finished that up. We're at graduation night, and they're kind of going through all the awards and stuff, and they come to what's called the honor grad award, which is like basically the honor grad of the pipeline. Like, and it's based off of peer review. So like your teammates vote on it and the cadre vote on it, and it's like the guy who kind of excelled, physically, leadership, academically, all that. Well, they're sitting there getting ready to call it the name, and they freaking call out my name for honor grad. Yeah, and which was like I'm still pretty low, if you know what I mean. So like for that to happen, like I just was never expecting it, and like for my wife to be there, like and my family, like knowing how much of a struggle this was just to get there, and like being 28 years old and everyone else is like 22 years old, like it was. I mean, it was huge for me. Like it was,
Wow.
I needed that at that moment. So
Wow.
that's kind of that's my how I became who I am story. But it's funny now,
really
but
cool.
it was pretty, it was depressing back then. But
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, I want you to share a little bit about your kind of experience jumping and stuff like that, if you want to share some of that. And
Yeah.
at some point, I want to get into that stuff we were talking about motivation and stuff. Remember in the restaurant? Because I really I just thought that was so interesting. I want to get into that. I want JRuss to hear some of that because I think he's going to have some good questions. But JRuss, right now, do you have any? Were you writing down any questions or notes or anything?
Yeah, I mean a little bit, but let's just keep going. We can come back to this stuff. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so you finish combat control school, right? And then you go to what's called SCTS. So it's the Special Tactics Training Squadron. And that's where you get all your advanced quals. So the very first thing you do is you go into pre-scuba and then you go to combat dive school. And you become the combat diver and do all that kind of stuff. And then right after that, you go to military freefall school. And so, as I'm sure you're familiar with JRuss, so the way it works for us is you kind of have, so the Army runs free fall, like they're the ones kind of in charge, just like the Navy runs the standards for combat dive. Well, Air Force doesn't have, we have our own dive school, but we don't have our own free fall school. So our team got split in half. Half of us went to Army free fall and the other half went to Navy free fall. So I went to Army free fall. So I was in Yuma for a while, which, yeah, you're in Arizona, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. So I spent way too much time in Yuma, and so I went there, and I got my free fall qualifications there. And I know I took a lot of time, but we could probably share some pretty funny stories. You're talking about night jumps. I got some pretty funny stories about night jumps. On the opposite side, though, with high illumination and seeing my shadow coming in, which you probably know where that's going. But anyways, so yeah, so I got my free fall qualification there. And if I'm being completely honest, like like you have like the dudes that are like the sky gods, and like that's what they do is they spend their time on, you know, jumping on the weekends, and that's their whole life revolves around that. Like I was a little bit older, I was married, my wife got pregnant shortly after I got on team, so I didn't really have the opportunity and time to chase the jumps that they have. I think we were talking. I think I have somewhere around 750 to 1,000 jumps. So yeah, a good amount, right? But no, I mean, there's dudes that have a lot more than that. Like y'all both. I know you told me like y'all have significantly more. Like that's y'all's passion. But I enjoyed it. I loved it, and you know, I mainly did it with work. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with the free fall stuff, and I appreciate and love all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far
Well,
as the mindset stuff, or
yeah, that stuff is really really interesting to me. I mean, all of it, everything that story right now is great. I really enjoyed that. But that mindset stuff, yeah, can you kind of go into that for a second?
yeah, for
And
sure.
then
Actually,
and then
I pulled
if
my notes up here.
JRuss may have some questions, we can
Yep,
stop you at some point. But
for sure. Okay, so the conversation we had at dinner or when we were in Cheers of the restaurant there. And if I start going off track on where you want me to go, just kind of like, hey, I really want you to talk about this. But we had talked about just like motivation and like where motivation stems from. And so I guess real short version, my background is when I left the military, I did some contracting stuff, and then I went and I got my master's in performance psychology. So I'm real big on the mindset stuff, and that's where a lot of this stuff is generated from is that performance psychology. But you have
just give a elevator pitch, 30 seconds about what you're doing, like the business that you work with, what you're doing, like just real brief.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, cool. So I work for a company. So I'm a DoD contractor now. So basically, anyone who says that they want to be a combat controller, a PJ, anything like that in South Texas, they go talk to their recruiters. They sign that work, and while they're getting prepared to take that initial test, they're assigned to me. So I'm responsible for preparing them mentally and physically to then go on to basic training and then selection. Right. So the government basically said, hey, we have a super high attrition rate. It costs us a lot of money to train these guys. And when they quit, you know, mid pipeline, we just lost a ton of money. So they hired us, a bunch of, you know, has-beens to then go and just basically try to prepare them so we can reduce that attrition rate. And so my background was, that's how we know each other, me and Chris know each other, because I was a strength and conditioning coach at the school where both of our kids go. So I did that. And then I also went back and got my master's in performance psychology. And so I am currently working with our human performance team to create a curriculum to help train, I'm going to call the developer, to help train the other developers across the country in how to basically take strength and conditioning, mental performance, and then tie them together and basically use the physical training to build the mental performance side as well. Is that it?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
So I'm working on a curriculum right now that we're gonna share. And so I had just gotten back from Arizona. Actually, I was in Phoenix working with our human performance team, and I think I'd been back for like 2 days when we ran into each other. But we got to talking about it, and so actually remind me, like, what actually led into that? How did we start talking about that?
I honestly don't know.
I don't either.
When you said you just were talking about the three things, that just like really stuck with me. That was so interesting.
Okay, cool. So you basically have what's called the self-determination theory, right? It's been extremely well researched, and it's basically like where does motivation come from? How do we develop motivation? And when we talk about motivation, you know, it's important to understand that really what motivation is. It's the fighting off of burnout is what we're really talking about, because we can go into the whole, like, you know, motivation is great when it's sunny outside and you're feeling good and, you know, it's a beautiful spring day, right? But then what happens on those rainy days when it's cold and you don't want to get up and do anything, right? That's when discipline comes into effect, right? But it's that motivation that gets us going. Discipline keeps us going. And that's the whole idea of the motivation is fighting off burnout. So the three things that you look for when you try to find or when you try to build motivation, right? Or what helps you to maintain motivation. The first one is competence, right? It's a belief that you can succeed or at least improve at whatever that skill is, right? Whether it's talking about the skydiving, right? Like talking about physical fitness, whatever it is, like you got to feel like you're able to get better, right? Because we've all done those things where we're like, man, I just suck at this. This isn't like, it's me for golf, right? I suck at golf. I don't like golf because it's not that fun for me. I have a fixed mindset towards that.
No growth.
Yeah, no growth. It's not possible. Like I'm a meathead, dude. I pound rocks. Like, but,
All right. So competence.
competence, right? So like that is the belief that you are capable to it's improvement is possible, right? And with that, we can kind of dive into that growth and fixed mindset, right? So when we talk, there's a lady named Carol Dweck, and she wrote a book called Mindset, and she's kind of one that pioneered this growth and fixed mindset. And basically, what it is a fixed mindset is that same mentality, right? Like you're born with the skills you're born with. Like think about like the little kids who are like I just stink at baseball. It's like, well, yeah, but you just started playing, right? Like you haven't actually had the opportunity to grow or get better at it. But when you have that fixed mindset, typically what that means is you're less likely to take on challenges. You're kind of closed minded. You base your worth off of performance, right? And so like you're either just naturally good or you're naturally not good. Versus a growth mindset is they see failure as an opportunity to grow, right? They see challenge as an opportunity to grow. They're the ones that whole like failure is not final kind of thought process, right? Like failure is just it's if I'm not failing, then I'm not really challenging myself, right? I'm not stepping outside my comfort zone.
Real quick, because JRuss and I were talking about something kind of. I mean, it's connected. It's going to sound a little bit silly, but it is connected. We were talking about video games, and he plays this video game online. It's like a MM. What do you call it? Like multiplayer, like tons of people playing one game. And then I play this game online where you're playing like 2-on-2, but all 4 people are online. And we were both saying how we've experienced where right when the game starts, if something bad happens, like our team immediately gets scored on, or for his, like their team immediately loses an area or something like that, whatever the game is, there's some people who would just instantly, they just want to quit. They want to give up. And I'm like, dude, I was talking to my son because he plays the same game that I play. And I would see him, he was starting to do that. And I told him, I was like, Tegan, when you get scored on by that other team, they're beating you and you're down 2-0 or 3-0 or 4, it doesn't matter. It's like, if you quit, you're giving up an opportunity. They're beating you because they're better than you. If you want to get better, you have to play people better than you. If you always quit when you're losing, that means you're only willing to play people that you are better than. How do you can't improve like that.
Yeah.
I told him one time, like I actually got halfway through it and he already knew what I was saying. And from then on, he doesn't quit anymore.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that like people, and JRuss said with the game that he plays, same thing. Like not everybody, but there's a group of people, a cohort of people, they just quit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh, it makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. So, I mean, because I think that's connected. Like how else are you going to get better?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too, right? Like, is when you quit, you just sealed your own fate, right? Because failure is not final, right? Like, you're better off. Like you can lose, right? That's fine. That's like you can lose. Like, I mean, look at professional teams. Like, look at a professional baseball team. You can win the World Series. That doesn't mean you have to go undefeated the entire season, right? But if they quit and just like forfeit the rest of their games after their first loss, like that'd be stupid, right? Failure isn't final. Failure is opportunity for growth. And if you once you quit, then you've made it final. Like you have left your mark as a failure because you have quit trying. But if you refuse to quit, you're going to get better inevitably, right? And that's what it is, right? And that's what competence is, right? We can develop, like you have to have that growth mindset versus that fixed mindset to even develop that competence, right? Because we all start somewhere, right? And I make the joke and I call it, we all have the Rocky syndrome, right? We think we can go from chump to champ in 2 hours. And that's just not how it works, right? That's not how life really works. Okay, so that's the first one, right? Is competence. The second one is autonomy, right? We want to feel that we're not being micromanaged, that we have control over our own actions. And that's a really good one to understand. Think like in the business world, right? Like if you're a salesman, right, you got to feel like you have the skills to be able to make sales, but you also don't want to feel like you're given a script and said this is the only way to do it, right? Like, well, that's not me. That's not how I do this, right? Well, the same thing could be said for anyone with sports. It's like, sure, there is a specific way that you hold a baseball to throw it, right? But like we all have different, like our biomechanics are different. Like we're built differently. Like, so I might have to do something slightly different. I need to know that I have the autonomy to make the adjustments that fit for me. Same thing with skydiving, right? Like just talking about different, shoot sizes, talking about different, like, I mean, all the different things, right? Like we fall differently. It goes to everything, right?
Yeah.
But just knowing that you've got the ability to have control and you're not being micromanaged. So that's the second one. The third one, excuse me, is relatedness, and that is that you have a sense of connection to others that are like-minded people and that you're pursuing a similar goal. And I think we talked about this one for a little bit too, just because as humans, we're communal in nature, right? Like we thrive on community, we thrive on feeling a part of something, and you know, however you look at this, a team is capable more or is capable of more than an individual. Like this is perfect for the military, right? Like the whole idea of being like the sole guy on a mission, right? There's a lot of fear behind that, right? There's a lot of fear of the unknown. But if you have just one person in your corner, one person who supports you, like your amount of confidence and it just skyrockets, right? It's another easy one with this is if you think about like a husband wife, if one of them decides that they want to get in shape and the other one's like I could care less, right? The chances of the one sticking with it is significantly less because they don't have that social support, right? Same thing. We see this. Oh man, this a good one is in selection, right? We see this all the time, and it's dangerous in a way, right? So early on, this sense of connection can be dangerous because what you see is you'll see two buddies that maybe they went through basic training together and they started selection together, and they kind of made this promise that hey, we're gonna do this together, and then one of them quits. Very high chance the other one's going to quit because he attached his success to that other person, right? So that's where it can be dangerous. And you see that too, like and this happens all the time too. You have that one like just athletic stud, like the beast, right? And he's in there and he has a bad day and he quits, and all of a sudden everyone looks at him and he's like, if that guy can't do it, there's no way I can do it. So they all start ringing the bell, right? And so that's where obviously there's danger to that, but then you pass this point, right? Where you become a team and like those guys that are left over, like nobody's quitting. Like the only way people are getting knocked out is if they get broke, like if they get hurt or something like that, right? Like it does at this point, it doesn't matter what you do to us. Like nobody's quitting. That's when you develop that team cohesion, right? And there is literally nothing that will stop you, right? Like we would be given, and I talked to one of my old buddies. We talked on the phone the other day, and he was talking about this too. Like we would be given unrealistic time hacks. Like it's like, hey, you got to be at the pool, which is a mile away, and ready to go in 5 minutes. Never going to happen. But we would all look at each other like, let's go. And it's like, boom, and you're going for it. Right. And that's the power of community. And so that right there is a huge part of the motivation and what keeps that going. And when you have those three things, right, you have the competence, the autonomy, and whether you want to call it relatedness or community right there, those are the things that keep you moving forward and keep you motivated to fight off that burnout and to keep pushing forward. And so that was the gist of our conversation.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
it's really good.
You can even go more so. So we talked about the growth and fixed mindset, and another big one that kind of plays into it is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So there's different types of motivation, and I'll just touch on this, and then we can open the conversation up. But essentially, when you talk about intrinsic motivation, that's when you do something for the love of it, right? So like think about like people who play sports for the love of the game, like that little boy who loves basketball and all he does in his free time is sit there in his driveway and shoot hoops, right? Because he just loves it, versus the other kid who just he has the extrinsic motivation where he wants the reward and the praise, right? And studies have shown, right, there's a place for both, right? But when you're talking about long term, it's the intrinsic motivation that's going to get you over those low times and the losses, and you're doing it for the love of the game, not for the reward, right? Because you're eventually gonna lose the motivation, right? If you're just seeking praise. And so that's kind of another factor into that too, that kind of ties into some of those things. But
yeah.
All right, cool. I'll stop talking.
All right, Chris, you got stuff you want me to go?
No, you please.
Well, I mean, just to start with, I was curious, if your job is to help the process for other people, how do you feel like the experiences that you had personally, what kind of light does that shine on the process? Because by your own words, you passed with just the ability to rest a little bit. Does that in your mind detract from the way that selection happens, or have you switched over to feeling like that, like being able to persevere through that sort of crippling difficulty is the point of selection?
That's a phenomenal question. And interestingly enough, that's what we spent a lot of our time talking about this past week in in Arizona when we were talking about this whole human performance. And it's like the term that we did, like, so we've always talked about when you go to selection, like we want to increase the lethality of our forces, right? Now the new conversation is we want to increase the lethality and the longevity of our forces, because what happens is a lot of guys make it through the pipeline and we all are a little bit broken and it cuts our career short. So the way I would answer your question is, I think, and this goes for anything, right? Like you can compare it to lifting weights, however, but I think you have to come in with a strong understanding of what your intent is, right? So when we talk about what is your intent, my question would be: is your intent to evaluate yourself, or is your intent to improve yourself? Okay, so if your intent is to evaluate yourself, then yes, I would say selection is about, can you just hack it? Can you suck this up? And that's an evaluation, but it's no different than going to the weight room. If you go to the weight room and you just try to max out every single day, you're never going to get stronger, right? You're just going to evaluate yourself constantly, but you're never actually seeking to improve yourself. And so one of the big things I say with my current job right now is, this is not selection. When you're training with me, this is not selection. I am a developer. My job is to develop you, right? And so my goal is to improve them so that when they go to get evaluated through selection, then that's that time that they have learned the skill sets to where they can survive, and they can grind for that time period. Does that answer it? Or
Yeah, totally.
okay.
I am curious about, I mean, you're a contractor, I'm a contractor. We can comment to the powers that be. Your voice would, to be honest, your voice would probably carry more weight than mine, as you've been through the program and I'm a silly civilian. But is there a commentary of, like, basically you spent a year of lifting heavy every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yep.
that kind of goes against the grain of, you, when you had the rest, you were physically able to do it. So does your influence alter the way that selection is performed, or it's still, sorry, you got to lift heavy for 9 weeks and then that's just the way it is because you don't want the standards to fall?
Yeah. So I went through almost 15 years ago, so it is very different now. And I would say that, and the guys that went through 20 years ago, it was very different then. Like they would have said that I had more of a crawl, walk, run process than even they did, right? But nowadays, like, I mean, we have full human performance teams. Like these candidates have nutritionists, they have strength coaches, they have like the angry cadre that I got in between courses. That it's a contracted strength and conditioning coach who in one specific session, like, worked for the Texans before he came to us. You know what I'm saying? Like they have legitimate people now that are watching these things and monitoring things. But I will say too, like with that though, the argument is too that we've gotten a little bit softer and kinder in that too. So there is a balance somewhere, right? Because you don't have that strength coach and nutrition with you when you're downrange.
Yeah.
So it's a tough question, but I think the answer is balance. I think the goal is that we need to prepare these guys to be able to go through periods of just suck it up, man. And then they also need to know then how to recover and rejuvenate. Because I don't care who you are, like everyone has a breaking point. And if we really wanted to, we could find everyone's breaking point. But I think one of the things we talk about is the old school way of selection was you would just grab a handful of darts, chunk them against the wall, and see which one stuck. Right? That is not, you're not developing resilience. You're seeing who already has resilience. Right? And that's how selection used to be done. The goal now, and this is really across the board, the goal now is that's great. Like we definitely want the guys who are already resilient, and we definitely know we're going to have the guys have zero chance. Like they're just not there, right? But it's those guys that are on the fence that with a little bit of work they could be there. That's who we're really targeting right now, because I mean, just call it what it is. We lost a big chunk of our military, and we need to get some of it back. Like our numbers are not where they need to be. I think that's probably the fairest way to say it, right? But you don't want to drop the standards, right? We can't drop the standards, like the soft rules. We cannot drop the standards. So we're not going to drop the standards. But how can we take those guys who they're on that fence? How can we improve them, right? How can we teach them to have these skill sets? And I'm telling you, it's this whole nature versus nurture thing. Like resilience is 100% teachable. Mental toughness, 100% teachable. And this is scientifically proven, and there's a process to do it. Yeah.
So would you say that, I mean, when you started talking about relatedness and community, as the three parts of the motivation. Uh, it sounded like if I was to quantify your job, you need to impart that feeling of connectedness and community before they even start the course. Is that fair to say? Like they need to feel like they're part of this, and it's going to be really freaking hard. But if they have that sense, their attrition rate must be lower.
Yes, that is 100% true. So, and I do that in two ways, right? The first one, especially when they initially get there, is we try to define their why and their purpose, right? Because just by defining your why and your purpose, you can already feel a part of a community that you don't really know yet. Does that make sense?
Not to
Um,
me.
okay, so what I mean by that is, if I define my purpose, like I am here because I want to be a part of something bigger than I am. Like I want to be a part of the special operations community. Like that is who I want to be. I identify myself. I see myself. Have you ever heard of the book Atomic Habits?
Mm-mm.
No, you should look into that one. It's
Yeah,
a solid book,
it's a
right?
good one.
It's a really good book. And so one of the things that they talk about there is, don't talk about. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but essentially, don't say like I want to work out more. Say I'm a person who works out more.
Oh, okay. I've heard that type of thinking. Yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Like
So
that guy
when
who does the book about quitting drinking, the easiest way to quit drinking or something like that. He
okay, yeah,
says, he asks somebody, he says, do you chew tobacco? And they're like, no. And he goes, why not? And he goes, because I don't chew tobacco. And he goes, right there, that right there. You're the type of person that doesn't chew tobacco. And so then he talks about in the book, he goes, anyway, yeah,
yeah. So that, and that's what I'm talking about. So when you define that purpose and that why, and you start identifying yourself as that type of person, you're now connected to that community
got
before
it.
you really even know that community,
Got
right?
it. Got it. Got it.
And so that's one way, right? And that's kind of out there, but you can do that and they don't even know they're doing that, right? Like when they first come in and I start talking to them like they're a candidate, like when I say candidate, like I'm talking about, like, we call them cones. There's a funny story behind that, but that's what they're called in the pipeline. They're called cones. And like, so I start talking to them and treating them like they're in the pipeline. They start identifying as someone who's in the pipeline. So
Mm.
that's one, and we've done that through just kind of developing their purpose and their why, right? But then the next thing that I do is that the group of guys that I'm training, we try to make them a team. Like we have a big group chat. They hold each other accountable. We assign a team leader who's responsible for all of them. When they show up, there are expectations on how they come dressed, what they bring with them, how it's set up. When I walk up, how they check in. Like there's a whole process. And if one of them screws it up, the whole team pays, right? And it's on that team lead to square those dudes away. So you've started developing that team there. And
Yep.
so that's JRuss. I think that kind of answers the question. So yes, that's
Yep.
exactly, we're trying to develop that team mindset now.
And this is something that I've been thinking about in it, kind of outside of this conversation, but it came up, and you might be an interesting voice to shed some light on it with respect to the motivation being teachable, toughness being teachable. Is there an athlete in everyone? Are we, as children grow up, have we moved some of those people away from athletics by not offering, we've got football and wrestling and tennis or whatever, baseball, whatever, but there's a pretty small number of sports that people do. And sometimes I walk through the world and I'm like, man, that guy is probably an athlete if he was just given the right opportunity and the right motivation. And especially, to be honest, when I look around the world and there's a lot of unfit people, I think maybe we missed opportunities to give those guys the passion that you're talking about, the intrinsic motivation to love what they're doing, but they missed it because baseball's bullshit, and I don't want to hit a round ball with a round bat. That's dumb, or whatever. Like, is there an athlete in everybody? Is that how you have to look at it when you're doing this selection process of every one of you guys can be good. I just got to find the right way to turn the screw.
Yeah, no, man, I would say yes, but I wouldn't call it an athlete. I'd say there's a warrior in everybody, right?
Mm.
Like even a dog will fight if you put it in the corner, right? Like, and so one of the things that I love to, um, I'll try to lead into that, but yeah. So yes, I do. I think that there is some type of level in every single person, right? But I think that and I say we, yes, it is we, it's parents, it's society, but it's also the individual, right? You got to own where it's at, right? Like we have stopped pursuing that inner warrior, right? Like the need to, as a man, right? Let's just go with men, right? As a man, the need to be a protector has been lost, right? Like not every man
Yeah.
feels like they need to be a true protector, right? So that the I better be somewhat capable of protecting my family because no one else is going to do it. That's kind of gone. Like we hire protectors now. But you know, one of my favorite quotes is that you have to, man, just call anybody, right? You have to be capable of great violence to be able to choose peace. Because if you're not capable of violence, you're not choosing peace. You're just weak, right?
Yeah, that's Jordan Peterson right there.
Yeah, that's where I got it from. Yeah, that's. I love me some Jordan Peterson. I went and saw him in San Antonio when he was here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, that's the whole like better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the same concept, right? So when you say, is there an athlete inside of everybody? Like, yes, like we were designed as men to be protectors. There is some level of protector in every single one of us. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, not everyone was going to be the hero of their village or their society, right? But they were all capable to take a stand, right? And so I think that we have to. I mean, without going down that whole rabbit hole, I think just for the growth and the longevity of our society, we got to figure out a way to fix that. It used to be that young men wanted to be the knights in shining armor, and that's just not so much the case anymore. But I think that it's possible, it's capable, or they should be capable of that.
If the expression of soft men, hard times, soft men, that or if where are we at in that sine wave right now? Where's your feeling?
Man, that's a great question. I honestly, I think the greatest generation, I think that World War II generation was our hard men. I think we're in the soft men making soft times. Even though we're coming out of this war, right? Like I get it. We've got some hardened warriors. And man, don't get me wrong, we got some hardened warriors here. But and you know, I don't think I would get shunned for saying this, right? But like the the war that we fought was not the same as World War II. Like, so you talk about near peer fights, right? When I say near peer, like equivalents, like us fighting China or us fighting Russia, right? Like they have the same technology and skill sets as we do. War on terrorism, they didn't have, like we were way more technologically advanced than they were, right?
Yeah.
So there we had a lot to our advantage there. That's why we were able to send small teams into villages where we were outnumbered 100, if not 1,000 to 1, right? And we were still able to dominate because of the technology that we have. But if we were in a true near peer fight, we no longer own the skies. We don't have every aircraft in the world above us to support us, right? Because there's air to surface threats that we just can't have those aircraft there. So now all of a sudden we're on a level playing field and things are very different. You go to that type of fight, that's terrifying, right? And in our greatest generation, our World War II guys, like in World War I, all that, like those guys, that's what they lived. Those dudes were hard. Those guys were hard on a whole nother level.
Do you feel like, have you ever thought about the idea of say an Israel type of situation? 2 years is required. Um,
Oh, I preach that like it's nobody's business.
yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it because here's the thing. I love that idea. So for civilizations, we had rite of passages like that
Yeah.
was the norm in various ways, right? And that's what took a young man, that's where your competence came from, right? Like that was base level competence, was you had young men who would go through some type of rite of passage, and once they made it through that, that's what made them contributing members to society, right? They were now men because of what they had done, right? And by definition, a rite of passage is something that you have to do on your own, no safety nets. You have to go do it, right? We no longer have that, right? So young men, what makes them a man? What takes a young man and when he wakes up and he looks in that mirror and says, I'm a man, I'm a protector, I'm a decision maker, I'm a leader, right? Is it your 18th birthday because you can vote and buy tobacco? It's not, right? That's why we have 28-year-old boys living in their parents' basement, right? Military is that can be a rite of passage. I'll tell you one thing, dude. You go in there, you go to basic training, wherever you go, right? They don't care who you are. They don't care where you came from. They don't care what your mom and dad do. It's like, what are you going to do today? What can you do to make it till tomorrow? That's a rite of passage. And on top of that, we're giving people discipline, we're giving them purpose, and we're giving them the skill. Right? A skill that whether they choose to make a career in the military or not, they can come out and now they have a skill that contributes to society. So yes, I think that's huge. I'll throw another one at you. I can't remember if it was, I feel like it was Sweden. I don't really remember. I had a candidate come through. He had dual citizenship with Sweden, and they do the same thing. They have 2 years mandatory service, but the way it works for college, and I'm not a socialist. I'm not saying this is how we should manage it, but I think this is a pretty good idea. But like the only way to get to college, because the state manages college, is you have to be in the top 10%. I don't care if your daddy's the richest person in the country. You can't buy your way into college. You either are the dude who puts the academic work in and is in the top 10% across the country and you get free college, or you go to the military.
Hold on with that merit-based system. Hold on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you gotta be careful what you say with some of that
You
stuff.
gotta earn your way. What?
Yeah.
Come on.
But no, man, I think that's huge. And honestly, man, when we take that away from our young men, we're robbing them. Like as parents, right? When we see our kids struggling and we go to try, and I got little kids too, man. I get it. It's not easy. Like you don't want your kids to suffer. You don't want them to struggle, but you're robbing them when you take that, right? Strength through struggle. Go do something hard and see what it's like. Don't rob your kids from that.
Tanya, Tanya in her 3rd grade class, she's one of the phrases that she uses on a regular basis is struggle comes before growth.
Yep.
And rite of passage. This is, I mean, compared to all the things throughout history that people have done for a rite of passage, this is a very small thing, but this is something that we started doing with our boys when they would graduate high school and getting ready to go off to college. So we've got 2 that are in college. So we've only done it with the first 2. The other 2 are still here at home. But there's a lake not too far from here, Inks Lake. And at Inks Lake, there's a place called Devil's Waterhole. Have you been there, Matt? You know what I'm talking about?
No, nuh-uh.
It's called Devil's Waterhole. And on the side of it, there's these big granite rocks, and there's a kind of this like spire of rocks that just go up really high, probably about probably right at 30 feet, maybe 35 feet, maybe. And so you can climb up there pretty easily. You can get all the way up to the top, and then you just jump off into Devil's Waterhole. So, I mean, as far as like rite of passage, safety, I mean, it's pretty safe. I mean, you could get hurt, but it's not this huge, crazy thing. You know, you're not going to fight a lion or something like that. But what we've done with our boys is before they leave for college, we take our family, we go to the Devil's Waterhole. We all swim across the way. We climb up the rocks. Even Tanya, she does not like going up there because she's scared of it, but she goes up there. And Tanya and I, we each say something to the boy that is getting ready to jump. And if you've already jumped, you can speak to the boy who's about to jump. But if you've never jumped, you don't get to talk. You can watch, but you don't get to say anything. So I'll say something to him. Tanya will say something to him. Even though she hasn't jumped, she gets to speak because she's the mom.
Yeah.
But so when we did it with Eason, he's our second one. Corbin had already gone a few years ago, so he got to speak and he got to tell his brother, what he wanted to say to him. But then Tanya and I, we take him up to the top and we stand there and we put our hands on him, and Tanya will say something to him, a blessing and a kind of a word of encouragement, whatever she wants to say. And then I will say something, and then we push him off. We push him off into the Devil's Waterhole. And usually the past couple of times, the 2 that we've done, I'm saying something to them along the lines of, I am pushing you off of this thing because I believe in you. Mm-hmm. You can do this. You are about to go out into the Devil's Waterhole of the world, and I'm sending you out there. And I'm sending you out there because I'm telling you, you can do it. And I believe in you. I know you're scared. I know it's going to be hard. There's going to be difficult times, but you are able to do this. You are capable. And we push them off. And it's a simple thing. And it's actually not that dangerous, but it's a really meaningful thing for our family. For our family, it's like really, special, you know?
And you just nailed it, man. And that's what it is, right? Is when we solve our kids' problems for them, that's the message we're giving them, is that we don't think they're capable of solving it
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And that is debilitating. And even when they're little, they don't even realize it, right? Like, because my son's in third grade. He doesn't have
Tanya,
Chris's
Miss Fikes.
wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was going to say it's Miss Fikes. He doesn't have Miss Fikes,
Yeah.
but they're all there. They're all together, and it's so true, right? Like, if I give him too much help, all he does is ask for more help before he even tries, right? But if I make him try it and make him figure out himself, and he realizes that he is capable of figuring it out, then and those things, he doesn't really come ask for help anymore. He just figures it out.
Mm.
But if I'm too quick to help, then it's telling him I don't think he can do it. I don't have trust in him. And no, I think you nailed it. It's super symbolic. I think there was another cool one. I feel like it was that Empire of the Summer Moon, the book about the Comanches. I think this is where I heard this rite of passage one, but it could have been from somewhere else. But they take a young boy, and there's a stump in the middle of the woods, right in the forest or whatever, and they blindfold the kid, and he has to sit on that stump all night long, blindfolded, and just listen to the sounds of the wilderness around him, right? Blindfolded. He can't take the blindfold off. If he takes it off, he fails. And he just basically has to sit there and just live in his fear, right? When the morning comes, he takes the blindfold off, and his dad's sitting there, and his dad's been there the whole night watching over him. Dude, like that, like almost chokes me up. It's like, that is the coolest thing in the world. And basically what it's saying is you can do this on your own. You can face your fear, but I've always got your back too. And I thought that was a really cool one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you guys were talking about rite of passage, what came to mind for me was the movie 300.
Yeah, they Gogi.
The kid going out with a spear and having to bring back the wolf, and those were some hard motherfuckers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, I had a couple questions from way back in the beginning, but it was about rodeoing, and I thought we might be going a direction of like factory farming, and so I wrote a couple things down over there. But I'm actually feeling pretty good. It's been
I do have a question about something you said earlier.
Yeah, send it.
When you were talking about, I think the words that you used was evaluate versus improve. Is that right? Were those the two words?
Yeah.
How does that, like practically speaking, like for a skydiver, if I'm, or a soccer, I coach soccer at Geneva. And so how do I instill that mindset in myself? And how do I instill that in my players or the people, maybe I'm coaching someone at the wind tunnel or at the drop zone, but like, what is the self-talk that you're saying? What are the questions that you're asking yourself? What are you focusing on? Like, what does that actually look like? What are you doing?
Yeah. Like application wise.
Yeah. Like, how's it different? How do they look different?
Okay. So, the easiest way to explain it. So strength coach, right? Like, just because we can talk numbers and that. So when we talk about evaluate versus improve, like, so when I say evaluate, most people talk like their 1 rep max, right? So if I went in there and I basically just tried to hit my 1 rep max every single day, I would not gain, or if I did, it'd be at a very slow rate. But in typical strength and conditioning, they basically say, if you are strength training, you're trying to gain strength, you need to work somewhere at or above 80% of your 1 rep max. So you could take that to just think about like RPE, right? Like rate of perceived exertion, or like your effort level. You need to be working at slightly above 80% of your max effort to improve, right? And so if we talk about resilience, what I'm doing with my candidates is I'm giving them tasks that is about 80% of what they'll max out on. So if I know that they can only swim so many meters underwater before they're just going to pop, like they just can't go that far, then I'm going to cut that back by 80%. And I'm going to have them do repetitions of 80%, right? So they're building
cut it back by 20%.
I'm sorry. Yes. Cut it back by 20%. So they're doing an 80% effort, right? Yeah. Or a good one is think about like, soccer, boxing, any sport, right? Like when you're training up for a fight, you never want to just go full out fighting a dude like we would in the fight, right? Like you're going to take it back. You're going to spar. You're going to go 80% in soccer, right? Or actually, let's say, let's go with free falling. Let's say you're trying to learn a new maneuver, right? Or you're trying to progress through a maneuver set, right? You would never take the new person and have them do that final effort, right? That whatever that maneuver is that they're trying to perform. You would never say, just go out there and see if you can do it, right? Like, I mean, you could do that, but like you wouldn't want to, right? Like, because that could destroy their confidence, right? So what you do is you scale it back. You have them work within something that is challenging, right? It can't be so easy that it's boring, right? But it has to be challenging but doable. So that's really what it is. You work inside a challenging but doable. But eventually, what happens is that challenging but doable starts to become easy. So then you bump it out a little bit until that becomes easy, and you bump it out a little bit, right? Progressive overload. Have you heard that term before?
No.
No. Okay, that's a strength training. That's a strength training terminology, right? And it basically says that over time, you need to continually add intensity or add resistance, or you're going to plateau. Gotcha. So you work at a level, but progressively or over time, you progressively overload. And it goes back to the Greeks, actually. There was this Olympian, his name was Milo. And the way that, this is just a story, I don't know if it's real, but the story goes that the way he trained for the Olympics is he had a calf. And every day he would throw this calf on his back and he'd walk up this hill. Well, as that calf grew, the weight got heavier and heavier and heavier. But because it was in small increments, he was able to manage that that growth, increase. Right? He got stronger with the process, right? And so that's where progressive overload essentially came from. Is eventually he's carrying a bull up a side of a hill, right? But it started off with this baby calf, and that's the idea of progressive overload. And you can apply that into everything, right? You apply that into the way you raise your kids, and honestly, that's how you build resilience in people, right? And I kind of alluded to that already, but you give them age appropriate, skill appropriate challenges that are just outside their comfort zone but doable. And when they succeed, their confidence improves, they feel more capable, and now they're able to then tackle something a little bit harder, right? And so that's how you improve them. And eventually, though, either it comes to game day or just it's the whole shit or get off the pot mentality, right? You have to evaluate, right? You can't just play it, because I get that all the time with candidates. You're like, well, I think I just need a little more time before I go to selection. Like, bro, at this point, like, you either got to go or it just ain't gonna happen, right? So you can't just always evaluate, or so you can't just always just work on improving, right? Because eventually there is a time where you have to evaluate. You have to see where you're at.
Are there any? Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. No, that's. Are there any not tricks, but like when you do plateau? Like the other day, I was working at iFly in the tunnel, and my friend was up there, and he is a much better flyer than me, like way better than me. So he was trying to help me learn this thing that I've been working on for a long time, and it's actually kind of an easy thing to do, but I'm not good at it.
Yeah, that's a fixed mindset.
You're not good at it yet.
Yeah, there you go.
And I feel like with this particular skill, I've kind of plateaued. So what do you do when you're at that point? Because I think that happens to all athletes, whether you're skydiving or you're playing soccer or whatever, like you feel like you get to point like, dang, I'm not getting any better. Like, and then you start feeling like kind of, I don't know, I start feeling a little bit annoyed, a little bit like, man, down on myself. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So once again, kind of going back to strength and conditioning, right? Because that's the easiest way to apply all that, right? So what I would argue is a lot of times when you're progressing, right? And so strength training and progressive overload doesn't look like that, right? It's like this, like that. It's like that, right? So if you ever look at a program, you typically have like a 4-week cycle, right? You have a 3-week build, 1 week deload. 3-week build, 1 week deload, right? The goal is that you're doing this, but you're working in this direction, right? And if you just go like that the whole time, you get what's called overtrained, right? And that's what happens is you get overtrained, and like mentally, physically, you feel run down, you feel defeated, you're frustrated, all those things, and this is me kind of like putting it to what you're saying here is I would maybe say maybe you've overtrained, right? Like you've beat this maneuver so hard that you're just frustrated, and maybe you just need a deload period where you just kind of step away, kind of let it clear out and come back on it with fresh eyes and a fresh mind.
Cool. Thank you.
That'd be my suggestion. I could be way off though, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of the idea, right? Is like a lot of times you just I always say it's because you get so hyper fixated on something, you can get tunnel vision. Like we've all been in a situation where we're running late and we're looking for the car keys and we're like running around flipping things over trying to find the car keys and they're sitting right there on the counter.
Yeah.
We've got so hyper fixated on an end result,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's actually another good conversation too. And I can touch on it or we can talk about it another time, but it's like how do you set goals? Like when you have a goal to set, right? Like so you have different types of goals. You have what's called an outcome goal, a performance goal, and a process goal. And this doesn't quite match up perfectly with what you're saying on here, but a lot of times when we talk about sports or something like that, the outcome goal is like if you ask a football team, like, what is your goal? My goal is to win the state championship. It's like, okay, well, that's great, but there's lots of variables there. You could do everything right and still not do that because there's just another team that's just better than you. But okay, we can go with that. Like your goal is to win the state championship. So what we have to like backwards plan, like, okay, for you to do that, like what was one of the limiting factors that kept you from winning state last year? It's like, well, we missed a lot of tackles. Okay, great. So what are you going to do? Like, what do you need to do to improve your tackling? It's like, well, we need to work on tackling drills, more than just once a week. All right, great. So you have a goal. Your goal is to improve or you want to put a numeric to that. It's like we used to call it 959. So you had 9 guys within 5 yards of the football 90% of the time. That was our numerics, right? So that was our performance goal that we were going for. So then what do we have to do on a weekly basis to improve that numeric number? Well, we're going to do pursuit drills. We're going to play to the whistle. We're going to do all these things and we set that up, right? So we have now set up a weekly process goal that is going to improve a performance number that should affect our outcome. And so and then you do what's called, you ever heard of SMART goals?
Yeah.
For that. Okay. So you do SMART. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, or relative and timely. And you try to keep them inside there. And so, for your maneuver, that's not really an outcome goal. Like you're not like your goal isn't to win some type of competition, but I would say like, how could you, when you come back to reattack that with fresh eyes, how could you set yourself up? Like, how could you basically backwards plan, going back to basic maneuvers that you can do well? How can you improve those so that you're now rebuilding back to that point that you're struggling with? Like, so kind of backwards plan and rebuild back to where your friction point is.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. JRuss?
Well, we're close to being done, I think. Matt, did you meet Johnny Gunn in Yuma?
Johnny Gunn. How long has he been there?
I work with him now. He's a former teammate.
Okay.
Very good flyer, but he was a SEER course instructor. He was in Yuma at the time that.
Yes, I did, there. Dude. I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
I work with
what
him
a cool
now.
name, Johnny Gunn.
Yeah. But he's also, I think, 12 years in the Air Force, and you guys kind of remind me of each other, actually.
If we're thinking about the same guy, which now I think I do, because when you said he was a SEER instructor first, like that wasn't all that common to have the SEER instructors there, but I do remember that. Yeah, I think I'm almost positive I was there with him. Yeah.
I'm gonna see him tomorrow at work. I'm gonna
tell him I said what's up. The chances of him remembering me are so small. Like those guys, they put so many people through that course, but
maybe. Yeah. Cool. No, this has been great. I mean, this is another one kind of like your cousin, Chris, where we could have just put the mic down and let Matt talk for a couple more hours.
Dude, there's so much to talk about. Like, I mean, maybe we should have you back on at some point because that's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, man. But if it gives you perspective, what we talked about is chapter 1 of the curriculum I'm working on out of 10 chapters.
Oh, okay. There we go. Yeah. So we'll have you back on 10 more times.
Yeah.
9 more times.
Yeah. Perfect.
Well, JRuss, I mean, any other burning questions before we close it out that you?
No, I mean, no. I think I'd have to listen to more and be ready to do that. And we can plan on a return visit for sure, especially if you got 9 more chapters.
Yeah. Well, Matt, anything that just really was on your mind that you had that you just really want to share before we close it out?
No, man. I think that really touched on, just kind of scrolling through what all was here, but you're talking about like application. Some of the different things that we talk about as far as like when you're in that situation, right, and you're looking for that motivation and kind of avoiding that catastrophic thinking. And you actually said it, like, I can't remember the term you used, but essentially it's like the think stop, like when you allow yourself to start going down like the negative thought process. Just kind of like having something that you do that just like mine was like, whew, like that was kind of my, like, I'm just like letting it out, like rephrasing. I think we talked a little bit about, and this can be like a segue to the next one, right? But like we talked a lot about perspective and about how you have a choice on whether you want to view something as a challenge or as a threat. And when we make that choice, right, if we choose to view something as a challenge, there's actually a physiological change that happens inside of us where we actually we'll go into that fight or flight mentality. We start to get that tunnel vision. We start losing dexterity, and the chances of us being successful in whatever that event is greatly diminished because of the perspective we chose, right? And the physiological change and hormonal change that happens to us because of that. Versus the flip side, if we choose to view something as a challenge, the same thing happens, but it really leads us physiologically more towards like what they call the flow state, right? Like where you're in the zone and you're focused on something. And we've all been there too. Like we've ever been in a situation where we're overwhelmed and we kind of have that fight or flight. And it's really fight, flight, or freeze. You kind of have that mentality versus other ones when you're like, oh yeah, dude, this is what I trained for. Game on, let's do this. And you're like, you're in it, right? Versus that challenge. And that's, dude, we could have a whole nother hour and a half conversation on that. But that all kind of goes in like with that competence and building that long-term motivation and avoiding burnout and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Man, I would really like to talk about that. That's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. We got it. We definitely got to have you.
Yeah. Part 2.
Yeah.
Part 2 for sure.
All right. Well, man, you've done it again. You've wasted another perfectly good hour listening to the Crave Show with Chris and JRuss and Matt Virnau this week. Sorry, Matt. Everybody, they wasted an hour.
It happens, dude.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening, Matt. Thank you for being here with us. JRuss, thanks.
Thanks for having me
listening, yeah, for sure, man. And we would like to have you back sometime. That'd be really cool.
Matt, I feel in these moments it's important because a lot of the people who listen to this are civilians. To quote, I think Teddy Roosevelt, he said that men sleep quietly in their beds because rough men stand ready to commit violence on their behalf. And it's a part of our world, and it's always nice to know that there's people taking care of those guys that need to do that work.
Yeah, man.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Hey, get out there, get in an airplane, jump out with your friends, have fun in the sky, enjoy skydiving. Growth mindset. What was it? Not evaluation. What?
Oh,
improvement. Yeah, struggle comes before growth. Get out there and have fun. All right, Crave, do more, be better. Thanks, you guys. See ya.